Please note, we would like to make it very clear, we are totally against the form of discipline described in the articles and accounts being used on minors and non-consenting adults. Although some of these accounts are fictional, and others may be an exaggerated reality, none of them are too far from the truth of what really happened back in those days.
Are females sadistic? The recent post from Well Disciplined prompted me to dwell on my experience of being sent to the head by a female teacher. Although his post bears no relationship to my visits for punishment, the fact that a young lady had sentenced me to be caned by sending me to the head's office and having to inform him that I had displeased her in some way was certain to result in bending for the cane. Upon return to the class, the way that I was questioned by her to establish that indeed my bottom had been caned, confirmed my thoughts that maybe she gained some sort of pleasure in my distress. I noted over my years at secondary school that it was the female teachers who did most of the sending to the head. Like Well Disciplined at the time, I hated her, but now years later I wish she could take me to the head herself. Strange, hey? Oh yes, it happened here. Some female teachers are hoping the boys get the cane, and they enjoy it. The recent post from Well Disciplined prompted me to dwell on my experience of being sent to the head by a female teacher. Although his post bears no relationship to my visits for punishment, the fact that a young lady had sentenced me to be caned by sending me to the head's office and having to inform him that I had displeased her in some way was certain to result in bending for the cane. Upon return to the class, the way that I was questioned by her to establish that indeed my bottom had been caned, confirmed my thoughts that maybe she gained some sort of pleasure in my distress. I noted over my years at secondary school that it was the female teachers who did most of the sending to the head. Like Well Disciplined at the time, I hated her, but now years later I wish she could take me to the head herself. Strange, hey? Quote, I once overheard a young woman questioning a young man about a school caning he had received 3 or 4 years before. She was clearly very interested and licked her lips as she savored the details of the rattan wrapping around the boy's proffered posterior. The young man clearly enjoyed describing his ordeal. I did very briefly contemplate offering to help with a reenactment but thought better of it. My original post was inspired by the fact that I noticed even as a boy that females had a deep interest in the infliction of CP to boys, not sure about girls as I went to all-boys school. The head secretary herself took great pains to be involved in the administration of the cane. Although not hands-on, she was always listening and had the task of entering the punishment in the record book. Believe me, standing in front of her desk with a recently caned bottom was not pleasant. It seemed to take her ages to fill the book in. At home I recall my older brother being caned for some offense. The local headmaster did the honors. The lady teacher who lived nearby was a witness. This was at mother's request. How times have changed. Reference my previous posts on primary teach dragging screaming boy upstairs to get strap on hand from male head. She did not stay in the room, however. Are females sadistic? Some are, some ain't. Female sadism is different and more subtle to male sadism. Excluding pathological cases such as at Ranevsbruck, Ilse she Wolf of ZSS used to delight in running her big bicycle over campers. She was later hanged for Z privilege. I was run over as a child incidentally by a speeding lightweight racer with another boy on it, and it never did me no harm. Females are tempted into sadism as is human when they are put in sole charge of someone weaker. This phenomenon can be observed wherever humans have to guard weaker humans, hence brutality cases in all manner of institutions. Schools and nannies are no exception. I think I have observed, however, only 2 to 3 cases of obvious female sadism in 30 years. It appears to be very rare. By genuine I mean where the female is actually getting sexual pleasure or titillation from punishment as opposed to just brutally bashing a kid out of frustration. One was a South African white exile who was rumored to bare-bottom thrash her brood with a hard hairbrush in the bedroom with particular attention to the daughter of the family. Another was a woman office worker who used to have a funny glint in her eye smoking a cigarette as she manhandled a large, particularly whippy perspex long ruler in front of young male student trainees. The last was a young Middle Eastern housewife who was observed one sunny day receiving charge of a boy who it appears had run away and was returned by the family chauffeur to an apartment in a wealthy part of London. The last words heard were "Don't you ever do that again," as the front door slammed and some minutes later distinctive methodical lengthy slap sounds emerged from the sitting room window. A glimpse of her expression was caught just before this incident, and it was again that look of looking down, haughty, gleaming, anticipated, pure sadistic pleasure at power over another in a bare buttock kind of a way. The vibe in aware bystanders, of which there were few, also came across as communicated. Butterflies, this strongly suggested to me that she utterly enjoyed whatever was going on. Oh, and then there was the giggling AU pair in a library with a pupil who kept stammering and getting wrong answers to some homework. Shocked we were when she was observed to rap the pupil on the hand and state, "Come on. Get it right. Or you will get one smack for every answer you get wrong." Or the woman on the bus overheard to say, "Behave, or when you get home I will smack you very, very hard." Or the other woman hugging a pupil and saying to it, "Well, we've tried spanking and smacking and it didn't work." I understand how the link is made, but it is not real. It just seems sadistic. I could never understand how boys at our all-boys public school could get caned. Badly thrashed, brutally, leaving black and blue marks and welts as they howled. In grim, dark, silent rooms, whilst outside fat-bottomed, untouchable ladies in delicate pantyhose wobbled and laughed carefree about in the town, oblivious to the 18th century torment being inflicted just a few hundred yards away on the backsides of young males. The importation into the town's newsagents of sadomasochistic porno mags, early 1970s, like Search and Relate, previously confined to small areas of Soho, London, did a lot to make aware boys that what was going down at the school was in many respects kinky in the parlance of the swinging hip early 1970s youth world. The complete indifference to these plantation-like episodes of flogging and the fact that girls and women in general seemed to have it soft no doubt contributed to the inculcation of a masochistic mindset in the boys that sought outlet in fantasies of these women being whipped themselves, a fantasy that was very attractive, as were the women to young rebels being so unobtainable and unthinkable and taboo. It is a curious transference, but as I say, there is little substance that these women were even aware of flogging or thought much of it. I think if anything the affected boys were being turned into sadists themselves by the flogging rather than masochists, though of course in every sadomasochist there are dual components of both sadism and masochism. They are usually able to switch between the two at will. I still remember a female teacher in my school, very fond, giving demerit points to any male student offending her. Then she will says, "You better wear extra underwear to school tomorrow, I will make sure you got at least 3 strokes of the cane." Then she will laugh when she hand the form to the discipline master. I always thought it was just plain nasty when school mom sent us boys for a whacking. You have got to be one heck of a sad bee *** star to delegate such things. You raise a very interesting question. Certainly some females are sadistic, but I don't think real sadism is any more prevalent in females than males. However, I do think that females are more inclined to gain pleasure or satisfaction from controlling males, and my experience as a child under the almost constant threat of corporal punishment suggests that they are far more likely to use some degree of added cruelty to gain or reinforce such control. The threat of being sent for the slipper or cane was much more likely to be made by a female teacher than a male one. Curiously, the few female teachers who administered corporal punishment themselves seemed far less likely to derive pleasure or satisfaction from the event. The removal of clothing, or the suggestion that this should be a part of the punishment, was almost exclusively used by women, both at school and at home. They undoubtedly knew the psychological effect that would have on a boy, especially an older boy. Although many of my female friends were subject to corporal punishment at home, as were the boys, it was very rare at school. It was clear, however, that the girls had a great fascination with how any punishment was conducted. The almost universal question was, did you have to take your pants down? When the answer happened to be no, a hope for your trousers usually followed. They seemed really disappointed if that got a no as well. In fact, my first serious girlfriend, I was 17, she was 16, asked if they caned me on the bare bottom at school. When I said no, she replied, "Oh, they should have done." I asked why she thought that, and she simply replied, "I don't know, they just should." As adults, I'm sure we have all encountered women who clearly derive pleasure from teasing, mocking, and belittling men, and I firmly believe it is based on a desire to control.